What inspired the transition from minister of music to pastoring?
So I don't think it was an inspiration per se. I think it was more of a calling to move from one area of ministry into another. So I did not even like the call. I didn't want the call. I did not think I need the call. But he put the burden on me to go to another or a next step. And so that was actually the transition from music ministry to the pastoral ministry. It wasn't particularly my own inspiration or my own ambition. It was just a call.
But stepping into something new wasn't easy. As he wrestled with the call, those closest to him could see the weight of this decision.
I remember him telling me that he had been called to start his own ministry. And at that time, God just spoke to me and said, "You're going with him." And that's what happened.
First step I took is I gathered some people together. I got 12 trusted voices, and we came together. I paid for this elaborate dinner, child, for them to come, and they all told them my vision, what the vision was, what I thought about the vision, and I told them to give me their honest answer if this is something that they think that could be established in the Bay Area, established even in the earth. And so they all gave me their honest opinions. They all gave me honest guidance. And so I was able to take from the counsel of wisdom and move forward with it. And then we started Bible study after that.
Among the 12 trusted voices was Carlin, who initially hesitated, but ultimately played a key role in shaping what would grow into a powerful movement.
I was one of the 12 people that pastor brought together to say, "Hey, I'm going to start this church and I want you to help me start the church." I had no intention of getting involved in ministry at all. He and I are really close, we're friends, we're best friends, and I was like, I will support you in any way I can, but at the time, I'll quantify it with, at the time, because of past experience in ministry and helping in ministry, I was not trying to be anything. I'll just help where you need help. So that's how I became a part of LRM, and I ended up helping to build it.
I moved to the Bay Area in 2015 from Ohio, and I have always grew up in the church growing up, and it was very important for me to find a place that will watch over my spiritual life and that can guide me. My brother, Colin Williams, actually, I met him through a group that we were a part of. And I knew that he lived out here in Oakland, California. And that's kind of how it started, having a conversation with him. He told me he belonged to a church. I was like, well, let me just start looking around for churches and stuff like that. And I don't think, I didn't want to join right away somewhere. And it started off not at a church, actually. It was Bible study. And I had went to other churches within the Oakland area. And I was like, well, let me start small with the Bible study and see where it goes.
With the Bible study growing, it was time to find a space where worship could flourish freely and the foundation of the church could take shape.
We were still developing at the time what would be our sound or what would be our experiences. And so what I did know is that we weren't a traditional type worship experience. So I think what Elizabeth did is give us some kind of foundation to that. It gave us the space and the room to worship freely without interruption. We built an altar there and we worshiped there. And that's how we wound up having the foundation of worship as we know it today.
I look back then and, you know, a lot of ministries start with less than what we had. And even though at the time we thought we didn't have a lot, but a lot of ministries start in somebody's living room or in somebody's garage or someplace. We actually rented a space and we had musicians and we had staff that we have continued to pay. We started pretty well, not having a big ministry backing us, not having hundreds of thousands of dollars in the bank. It literally was just a man with a vision from the Lord to say, hey, I need you to teach my people about how I want them to live. And like that is like grassroots ministry at its finest to me, and that's what I remember about that time.
The Lord kept telling me to build with what you have. And so even though we started with 8 members, I felt as though it was my opportunity and my responsibility and my stewardship to build the 8 and multiply the 8. And so we toiled with the 8 until 12 came, and then we toiled with the 12 until 19 came. We toiled with the 19 till 30 came, and then it started growing from there.
When people join the church, those are good moments for me. Accepting Christ more than anything. There's something emotional about that with me because I just think that's really a commitment that you have said yes to with God. And just to see that, I tear up a little bit, and it makes me happy because I know they have made the right decision.
Growth is never without challenges. Instead of letting outside voices shake him, Pastor Bo stayed focused on his purpose.
At first, I took on the weight of the criticism, and I made it a fuel for me. But then I began to change and not even worry about what anybody on the outside of the ministry had to say. What I did was I focused on what was happening on the inside. And so when I focused on what was happening on the inside, the criticisms and all of those things kind of faded out. So I no longer heard them.
He said death and life and the power of your tongue. It didn't say you have to do something. It said you have to speak something. Yeah. And you can't speak it without faith. Yeah.
Every now and then there's a testimony. Every now and then when you're at your lowest, a testimony comes through. That's something you said, something that you did, something that you prophesied, something that a word that you gave them, a hug, a smile, helped them through their life. And to see people's lives change, that was the thing that kept me going. It wasn't the numbers. At some point, the numbers became minimal in my mind. It was the impact.
Elizabeth Baptist Church gave the church a space to grow, but they knew it wasn't home. As the vision expanded, so did the need for something more. That next step brought them to an unexpected place, the flight deck, a space meant for plays and performances, but one that God would transform into something more.
The flight deck was a vision come true for me because I didn't see us as a traditional church, and this wasn't a traditional space. And so what I thought was awesome was, or what was challenging first was, I wanted to be in the theater because I loved the black box where you can do whatever you want to. But we started off in the rehearsal space, and the rehearsal space only held like 50 people. But we didn't even have that at the time. And so I was disappointed that we didn't get the theater, but we started off in the rehearsal studio, and we began to build from there.
flight deck was amazing and weird at the same time.
It was definitely interesting because where we were initially, we started in the little small area, but then we moved to the theater. And in the theater, it's always a different setting. Like one service, it was, you know, a jail cell that was on the stage where we had to do that.
We had George, our drummer at the time. He was literally in the jail cell, playing the drums in the jail cell. Because they would not let us alter the sets in any way. That was a part of our contract.
The downside to flight deck was, as a choreographer and a dancer, creating dances and having to dance around jail prisons. We walked into mountains before. We done walked into half stage, whole stage. We done walked into the craziest backgrounds that you can possibly think of.
We never knew what we were gonna get when we walked in the building.
We walked in there one day and it looked like it was a set of Good Times.
We walked in one time and it was foil, tin foil, everywhere.
They had all type of writing on the wall, and some of them were curse words and expletives. So we had to get up there and cover, you know, when service started.
And a plank down the middle of the room.
There was another one where it had stairs, because I remember Messiah had danced that when on the top level of the stairs.
We walked in one time, it was a revolving house, like a huge house that spun around. We walked in one time, it was Noah's Ark.
They had dirt on the side of it. So it was always very interesting to do worship there. But I mean, the focus basically, you know, no matter what was there, our focus there was to worship.
At first, the flight deck didn't look like a church, but it didn't take long for the presence of God to turn it into one.
I think the worship at the flight deck shaped us because it gave us the sense that we didn't have to be in a traditional church setting with a cross on the top or the communion table in the front or the banners on the wall. We didn't have to have that space to worship God. We could worship God in a space that nobody would have even thought.
No matter the setup, no matter the scene, worship was unstoppable. In that space, breakthroughs happened, people's lives shifted, and God's presence never failed.
It didn't matter, we've been to several locations, but no matter where we was, the Spirit of God was so heavy in the room, it didn't matter what was going on. Like, we even had multiple weird, different setups or whatever, but no matter what it looked like, the Spirit of God never was neglected in the life experience. We always brought the life experience no matter where we were.
Coming from a more traditional church setting, it was different the first time, but what I can truly say is that the one thing that we carry at Life Nation is the presence of the Holy Spirit. So once you get in and you encounter that excitement and the true presence of God, you don't even pay attention to where you are or the surroundings. The one thing that always held true was no matter where we were, the presence of God was there, so the environment didn't matter. The only thing that mattered was the true presence of the Holy Spirit.
We was just soaking in everything. In the beginning, we just soaked in everything. We could see the change in him. So every word that was coming, we just knew, and we would just soak it in and then go home and try whatever, because it would be like a step-by-step word. He would give us practical steps to get through the many situations that we were facing at that time.
It was amazing. I mean, you walk in and you slapped with the Holy Spirit. I mean, it's no different than here. However, the flight deck was packed. We had to add chairs. The Holy Spirit was moving. Pastor was always bringing a powerful word. It was amazing. However, we knew it was time to continue to elevate and move forward.
As Sunday worship flourished, Bible study needed a home of its own. The flight deck served its purpose, but the next step led LRM to Emeryville Rooms, a space where teaching could go even deeper.
It was intricate and it was intimate. We had to be detail oriented. We would feed people. That's when we got the concept of feeding people. So we would feed people before Bible study and after.
A very, very significant moment for me that I experienced at the flight deck was actually at the Bridgecourt room where we were doing Bible study. We had started doing something called Cupcakes and Conversations. We had to write down what our goals were going to be for the next 6 months. And I had wrote down that I was going to open up my daycare again. And it was very significant to me at that time because I did not have a home. I was homeless. And to open up an at-home daycare, you had to have a home. That year, I don't remember the actual year, but I do know that by March of that year, I had moved into my apartment, which was 4 months out. And by May, I had went into a California certification program for childcare and started my actual paperwork so that I could open up my daycare.
What stood out the most to me was it was broken down in a way for everybody to understand it. You had the kids on one side, the adults on another side, but it was like a literal class, not just us going through a text and adding a nice little message to anything. It was like a literal class. We were able to go into the text, and it was series. It's always had series where we can have time to go in depth with the text.
We was in Taco Bell for Bible study, but yeah, it was real cool. It was when Quincy was running it and everything, so yeah, I always had fun being in Youth Nation.
My first Bible study, my first lab session, I accidentally got there early. And it happened to be the first session of 2K2, leadership and the gift class. And so that was my introduction to my gifts. I started knowing something was going on with me or something was different with me, but did not know what the gifts were. So I actually did not even know for real what a prophet was until I started here.
Life Nation wasn't just about showing up on Sundays. They built a foundation through Bible study, through worship, and through family.
Bridgecourt Room served its purpose to provide labs for us. And I do believe that it provided another opportunity for God to say that it doesn't matter where we were, that He was going to be in the midst of it. So Bridgecourt Room was a conduit to what was next.
From buildings to theaters to courtrooms, LRM saw that church wasn't about the building, it was about the people. But nothing would prepare them for what came next. When the world shut down, the church had to find a new way to stand.
Viral pneumonia has hit central China's Wuhan city. Authorities have reported 27 cases in total.
It's a new type of coronavirus.
A mystery virus they'd hoped to contain, but one we now know can jump from human to human.
It's one person coming in from China, and we have it under control. It's going to be just fine.
Risk is low in the United States. The risk is low.
So at least 565 people are dead and more than 28,000 infected with coronavirus around the world. That's if the Chinese are telling the truth.
I really believe they are going to have it under control fairly soon. You know, in April, supposedly it dies with the hotter weather.
One person with coronavirus in King County, Washington State, has died.
9 Americans now have died. 11 people have died from coronavirus.
Tonight, the first containment zone here in America within a 1-mile radius in the New York suburb of New Rochelle.
The U.S. has now surpassed 13 million confirmed COVID-19 cases, adding more than 1 million cases in just 6 days. And that comes during a holiday week when some results and reporting are expected to be delayed.
Hospitals from coast to coast are feeling the strain. This week, 24 states hit a record number of current hospitalizations, with the number of patients across the country increasing nearly 12%.
I think that in the beginning we didn't particularly understand the effects of COVID, so we didn't know how severe it was. The initial lockdown was only supposed to be for 2 weeks, so we simply thought that it was going to be for 2 weeks, and then that week lasted for almost a year and a half. So it was about readjusting. I think one of the biggest things that I had to face was the lack of momentum, because we had so much momentum going out of the flight deck. We were on our way to our second service because our first service was so full. People had to put chairs in the lobbies and all that stuff. And so for us to be on that type of momentum, and then we had to redirect and transition, I think that was a tough move for me as a new pastor. But we were able to be resilient with the right team, and we were able to go online and learn how to actually have an authentic worship service online.
Momentum was lost, but faith wasn't, and the mission didn't stop.
I will say it was difficult because not only did I have to have faith for myself, I had to have faith for others. And you hear all of the people that were dying, you hear all the people that were very sick and in hospitals and ventilators, and you heard the horror stories. So one thing that I had to do is, I need to stay in prayer. I had to stay in constant communication with people. So we were always calling. I was making sure that everybody was okay, making sure my team reached out, make sure that nobody was sick. And if they were, I wanted to have very specific, not instructions, but I wanted to I wanted to hear reports of how they were.
We had already started declaring Psalm 91 in our first Alive session. When COVID came, I'm gonna say that we were prepared but unprepared. It was a sadness that we all couldn't meet anymore. But I can say that our faith was still there, faith increasing by way of the Holy Spirit.
I'm not gonna lie, that was hard. I was going through a really serious depression of my own during COVID. And by that time in 2020, Pastor made me the director over operations and ministries, or I forget what my title was back then. I was still doing administration, but it was a fancy title that kind of made me like over the church. So that plus dealing with my own personal things, it got me in a better place of prayer.
While fear spread, so did faith, and Life Nation found a way to keep worship alive. COVID threatened lives, but testimonies of healing and deliverance continued to rise.
I personally ended up getting COVID-19, which shut down all of my organs. They didn't think that they were going to be able to save me, but by way of the Holy Spirit, and because everything that we had been taught, the Holy Spirit guided me through a season. So I was able to, I was able to navigate through it in a way that it taught me to walk closely with the Lord and follow His instructions. Out of that, it taught me to follow the instructions of the Lord. So COVID had a great impact on myself. It had a great impact on ministry, but I feel like it made us stronger. We were stronger after COVID than we were when we went in, because the favor of God was up on this ministry by way of the teaching of Pastor Bo and Mom, and just by way of the Holy Spirit.
I was a part of a lot of ministry at the time, so we shut down and we were assembling at a church, but not everybody was there. So there was like a small select few of us who would assemble, and at the time, Pastor was being very considerate. And when I heard, at first I was upset because I wasn't getting called to come in and do the ministry, and I'm like, what's going on here? But even when Pastor expressed, it was because I had a child, and they were trying to be cautious and mindful of myself, Delisha, and those of us who had children. That in itself was beautiful care, always staying connected with us and finding innovative ways to keep hope alive while in the ministry.
Church wasn't just a building. It was wherever God's people gathered. Every step of the way, God provided, even in the most unexpected places.
New Destiny opened in their classroom during a time where we needed a place to worship because we had tried to worship at my house, but the neighbors weren't having it. And so I had to move into a facility. And so we at least had a place to worship. We were able to set up cameras, chairs, these things, and all of that, and tape. So I think it was just an adjustment for us versus a challenge. It was just an adjustment of how do we make it look authentic, how do we make it sound authentic, and how do we make the experience authentic. So I think it was more a creative process versus just a challenge.
So the first time we had service at his house, it was so heavy even in there that the neighbor was like, the next door neighbor was like, well, like basically he kind of complained, but he was like, he kind of said something like, but yeah, it was so heavy in there, like it was so impactful in there that we had to move to another location. Like we couldn't do too many services in that apartment because you know how we are. We don't know how to act.
Our musician Thomas, he had acquired a studio that had a big, huge warehouse in the back. So we turned half of the warehouse into a worship service, a worship center. And the only challenge it was to go all the way to Pittsburgh every week. I think that was I think we had some of the best services there. I think that people were trying to sneak in. They were trying to figure out where we were to sneak. You couldn't keep them people away. I think some challenging things that happened was, they had a bingo hall right next door to us, and the sheriff came and shut the bingo hall down right while we were doing sound check. So we were, I had people hiding in the back or whatever, and the sheriff was just like, "Hey, how y'all doing?" And he went on about his dick, but he shut that bingo hall down. So it's all about that. We had adventures and we have stories about it, but I think it was like God opened, every time we needed a space, God opened the door. And so because he opened the door, he made a way.
The global pandemic, a sudden shutdown, everything changed overnight. But for Life Nation, worship didn't stop. Instead, it found new ground. The transition to San Pablo brought new opportunities for worship, ministry, and growth. But with every blessing, there comes a test.
At the end of COVID, we did the Lord blessed me to have this great, weird idea to write an album. And so in 3 months, we did, and we, from beginning to end, from conception to all the way to manifestation, we wrote an album, learned the material, learned the words, learned everything in 3 months. And so we had it at a place called Treasure Island. We had it at Ebenezer Restoration in Treasure Island. And what happened was after that, they began to get into talks with us and ask us, did we need a building? And so knowing our state at the flight deck, that we were already busting at the seams, we decided to go take a look at the church in San Pablo. And it was very convenient for the needs that we had and what we were about to grow into.
San Pablo wasn't just another building. It was a declaration, a statement that Life Nation was here to stay.
We were in a multicultural community, a predominantly Latinx community, and The way I looked at it, this was an opportunity to kind of tap into those people that are interested in what we need. And that was kind of my hope. It was a beautiful space, so we put together some plans to like really make good use of the space, and we did a lot of that, honestly.
We was excited when we moved to San Pablo because, you know, we had been moving so much, you know, because when the pandemic happened, we moved into the little room at New Destiny, and then we moved back to the flight deck. Then, you know, when the pandemic started happening again, then the flight deck closed down, and then we moved to Pittsburgh, and we were in Thomas' studio having service. And then when we finally got the opportunity, we got our own building, everybody was excited. I know I was excited, and I could not wait because I said we finally got a place where we can have worship and be free.
Amazing to be able to go into our very own space and worship, and really just kind of create an atmosphere that was more conducive for the vision that our pastor had set out for the house. Because when we were at the flight deck, we did not know what we were going to encounter every week due to the different plays that they would have. So just to be able to go into the space and just worship freely without having to disguise certain things that might have been in the background that didn't go with the message or did not go with our actual beliefs as a church. So it was an amazing feeling.
It was great to be in a place where we didn't have to necessarily keep on having to literally set up and break down each Sunday. That was our thing as far as each service we had from the beginning. We had to bring in speakers and set up drums and keyboards and whatever have you, and break it down each service. So it was a blessing. It was, and we had to start having a team. It wasn't just me, myself, and I. So it was liberating. It was exciting.
I believe the life experience was free and authentic. I believe that one thing that LRM does very well is wherever they are, they create a foundation of where God can rest. And I believe that it took a few months of us getting into or used to the space itself, but I believe that it gave us a dwelling place for God to live and inhabit. We begin to get a different type of people because we understand that every time you change locations, you don't keep everybody from the first location. And we not only did we move churches, we moved cities, we moved locations and time. And so we went from 9:15 to 3 o'clock in the afternoon. We went from Oakland or downtown Oakland to San Pablo, Richmond. It was a place that was bigger than where we were. So we were able to do more things and accomplish more things. And it became very apparent that God is with us. And wherever we went, God was there.
As Life Nation flourished in San Pablo, an unforeseen challenge arose. What seemed like a place to grow became a battleground that tested faith, patience, and endurance. What was supposed to be a season of stability quickly turned into a season of uncertainty. The legal battle shook everything, including faith.
I will be honest, my faith took a little shot because when you don't go to a church or a location to change the location. You go with the expectation of being permanently there. Because who wants to move? Who wants to uproot a group of people and move to a different location? And I think what happened is, I think we realized that all church people just are not kingdom people. What impacted my faith a little bit was when you're striving to do the right thing and you have people who claim they are kingdom people do the wrong thing, it has an ability to mess with you in a sense of how do they get to continue with your grace and your favor, and they did us wrong. Legalities of everything happened to no fault of our own. But having it be no fault of our own, and we wind up in between a church and an owner, and we were in the in-between people, I think it took a toll on us. I think it took a toll on me more than it did the church. I think the church, I've been teaching faith since we started, but I do believe that at that time, the church exhibited a faith that I didn't have. And as the leader, I think that I was so worried about the people that I didn't really look at what God was actually doing and how San Pablo started and how San Pablo ended. I think it was the transition of me building a faith that I did not have before. It was a struggle, it was a fight, it was a trial, but as you can see, we made it.
Hope is a powerful force. It pushes you to believe in the unseen. But what do you do when that belief is tested by setbacks?
When we acquired the building, I think that it was a project that we had to actually build out. So me as a visionary, I was able to kind of plan out every room. I had, I knew where the sanctuary would be. I know how it would be positioned. I knew the staging. I knew the lighting. I knew the kitchen, what that was going to be. I knew we were going to do with all of the rooms. I did the children's area, the media area. I knew every part of what the building was supposed to become. Sometimes as a visionary, we want things so bad to where, and we want them for the people so bad to where you may even miss small things that, or red flags that come up. And my heart was, we deserve a space of our own. We've helped people build. We gave people money to rent spaces that did not pay the rent on time. We did everything.
But just when it seemed like everything was aligning, the unexpected happened. Plans unraveled, and what was once certain became uncertain. A contract unsigned, a promise undone, and a vision put on hold. In that moment, faith was tested like never before.
When I realized the contract would be honored was the day that we had finished Bible study. It was on a Tuesday evening, and the contracts were already ready to be signed. And when I came out of Bible study, there was a meeting. Somebody was waiting for me to have a meeting, and it said that the owner had decided not to sign the contract. And the owner had presented an alternate contract. So now the contractor who presented the contract did not want to sign the owner's contract. And that was a pretty rough day, especially this was a Tuesday. Work on the building was supposed to start Friday. When I realized that this was falling apart, especially after we had done so much negotiation, we had done so much of the back work, we had already done the processes that we were told to do, and to get to that moment and to see it fall apart and how it not only tore that moment tore the relationship with us and the owner, because I believe that you should be men and women of your word, and for us to get that close and it not come to fruition, that was a reality that really I wasn't prepared for. I was so happy, and then the turn of events in minutes to where I was mad and ashamed, embarrassed, because we were that close, and he made a decision that he didn't want to do it with us.
Even in our lowest moments, God is still moving. Sometimes it just takes time to see it.
It took a while. I think that we, as Christians, I think sometimes we don't realize that no matter how deep our faith is, disappointment is disappointment. And I think that I had to walk through a season of disappointment. I had to walk through a season of questioning God. I had walked through a season of questioning myself. Whether you know, because sometimes when you take those leaps and it don't work out the way you think about, you go back to, well, I prayed about this. I thought you said this, but did I really think this, or did I really hear you? And if I didn't hear you in this, how did I hear you in that? And so it makes you question everything you know about God. We were able to get out of the contract without paying excess anything. We were able to mutually agree to something that happened, you know, whatever needed to happen as far as legally.
The legal battle wasn't just about losing a building, it was a test of faith, leadership, and perseverance. But pastoring isn't just about preaching on Sundays, it's about carrying the weight of the people, even when your own burdens feel overwhelming. Through betrayal, doubt, and loss, Pastor Bo pressed forward. This is the unseen side of ministry, the cost of the calling.
One of my biggest challenges and my biggest joys are people. What you realize is people who are not with you at first often turn and become like loyal supporters of yours. And then there are people who will say they'll never leave you that walk out the door. So I think those are challenges, especially when you love people. And I don't think people understand that preaching is the easiest thing to do. Pastoring is the hardest. You have to be counselor, you have to be businessman, you have to be financial resource center, you have to manage people's attitudes, you have to be parent one day to grown people, you have to manage the expectations of people. You gotta do all of that and then have a prayer life and then, you know, see what God wants you to do. You have to deal with dishonor from people who really don't believe in your leadership. You have to also learn how to love people that you know don't like you. It's a lot of things that go into pastoring that people do not understand. So I think one of the things that the Lord has to give a grace for when it comes to pastoring is, I don't think people understand that pastoring has to be graced to do it. You can't just jump up and be a pastor. You can jump up and be a preacher, because preacher is just delivering something. But how do you deliver a people? And so I think that's the key is my greatest joys and my greatest sorrows are the same. The way I manage being a spiritual leader and being a human, I'm still learning that. But I'm learning that I can't lean into the human side. One of the things that I learned is you can't bleed on the sheep. So I'm learning who to lean on and have outlets. And I think that one of the things that we have to do is learn how not to internalize everything and take everything personal, because everything is not about you. And so I've had to learn that this faith walk, because when you think about it, if you really think about it, pastoring will mess you up, because you'll think that if God called me, this should be easier than this. If God called me, the way should be a lot easier than this. And you'll find out that when you're in the middle, you have to manage the middle. You're not where God called you to be and where God showed you to be, and you're in the middle, and then here's a storm. And so you're too far to go back, because you really haven't pastored really good until you're ready to give it up. And so one of the things I've learned is to lean into my human side when I'm at home, and really just woosah and allow God to heal. And then I do have great connections outside of church that I've leaned into, and then it gives me the strength to go back into the area of where I can deal with people and deal with mental issues, emotional issues, and those type of things. So that's what I do.
The hardest battles aren't always seen, they're felt. The weight of leadership, the pain of loss, and the heartbreak of watching people walk away tested faith in ways words could never fully capture.
I'm learning how to not take it personal, but I think that it's been a difficult journey because sometimes people leave you in the most inopportune times. Some of my leaders left after we lost the building, and that was hurtful. There were people who we paid their rents, people we bailed out of jail. There were people that we made sure that they had food. We sent people food to their house. We kept their secrets. We kept their lies. We kept their whole lives. And all it takes is one thing to make them angry, and then they leave. They say God told them to leave, or they slip out. And I think that, you know, one of the things I have learned is that people are people, and people are people everywhere. And just because you have Christian on your forehead doesn't mean that it replaces you as a person. And so as a pastor, I've had to battle, because I'm human too, I've had to battle not becoming bitter and not letting other people in. Because you can become bitter and keep everybody out, and now you're isolated. When ministry is about people. And so if ministry is about people, the Lord has to keep my heart pure about people. I've always tried to let them know that they're still loved, whether they're here or not, because it's not about whether you are at LRM, it's rather you're still in the kingdom. And if they're still doing kingdom work somewhere else, I celebrate them. It doesn't negate the fact that there have been people you invested time, energy, money, resources, education, skill, anything in, and you think that if you do good to people, they'll be good to you. And that's not always the case, especially when it comes to church. I believe that I've never blamed myself for people leaving, because I believe if God sent you here, I couldn't have told you, I couldn't have done something for you to leave. However, there have been times I've questioned whether I could have done something better, whether I could have done something different. In some cases, maybe. In some cases, no. I went through every scenario. I'll go through every scenario. I will go through every line by line, precept by precept. And there's some people that they came for the wrong reason. They didn't even come for God, they came for me. Or they didn't come for God, they came because they thought that this was a position that they could get, or they were gonna come take over something. And when it didn't happen the way they thought it was gonna happen, they got out of here. There are some people who they left and I didn't even know why they left, you know, which some things could have been avoided had they only spoken up. I've never had anybody sit down with me I think one of the hurtful things is I've never had anybody sit down with me and had a conversation with me prior to them leaving and say, hey, I'm feeling this way. You know, I would love for us to be able to do, because my thing is, even if this is a partnership, it would have been great for some of them to sit down with me and say, hey, how can we navigate this before it got to the point of leaving? The truth is, again, because people are people, and people, some are stable and some are not. People will be with you one day and people will not. One of the things that I have learned is that I don't put trust in man. I have to put trust in God. And when people come, I cannot judge why they're here. And if I can't judge why they're here, I can't judge why they left. So.
After all the trials, transitions, and growth, Life Nation arrived at its current layover location, a place that at first felt temporary, but became something much more, a home where God continued to move.
When we moved to our layover location, where we're at now, I walked in with Pastor, and my first thought was, this church is old. Sorry. I'm like, this church is old. How long has this church been here? But The good thing about it is, at the time, it was just going to be our layover location. So I was like, we ain't going to be here long. We can deal with this old archaic cold church with the hard pews. We can get through this, but regardless, it doesn't matter if it's an older church, if it's a newer church. But when we come together and we enter into his gates with thanksgiving, who cares? Because as long as God is in the room, it doesn't matter.
Peace, strength, that even after all of this, we still here. We still kicking. Like, that is, to me, so beautiful. And even when pastor and other leaders bring up the fact that many thought we wouldn't make it past 6 months, and look at us. We have grown a small child. It is commendable. It is beautiful. And I love this ministry. I wouldn't leave it for anything or anybody. I love this place. Life is what you get here. Being restored is honestly what you get here. We embody our name so well.
9 years. 9 years of building, growing, overcoming. Through every season, this church has stood strong. It has not just survived, but thrived, embodying faith in action. And for those who have been here since the beginning, the journey has been nothing short of miraculous.
From the first day I went to LRM, and the experience that I had, the worship experience, the praise experience, oh my God, the word, and how pastor at that time, his teaching and his methods, it was just right on, and I felt just confirmation in my spirit, and the Lord was like, this is where you're supposed to be. Now, did I join on that day? No. I kept coming and sitting in the dark, but eventually I moved into that place. I just kind of sat in the back for a long time. I would come and I would be out. Then slowly, I began to, how can I say, I guess just give in to let my will go. And it was like all about, okay, Lord, let your will be done. Yes, and I guess, yeah, totally accepting just LRM, being the place where God is planting me. So that's how I really, how I came to be there.
It's not fake here. We do say we're real people with real struggles, and we actually all go through real situations. And what I love is that we're not forced. Like, I came from a church where it was very religion-based, but this one is very relationship-based. Don't get me wrong, that don't mean we neglect the word, that don't mean we leave it out, but one thing you have to know here is that you're gonna get the real thing. Sometimes in different churches and religions, you get to pick and choose, or people pick and choose who belongs and who doesn't, but here at this place, it don't matter what you did, it don't matter what you're doing in the moment, it don't matter what you thought, what sins you committed, like, you're welcome. And that's one of the biggest things that I love about this church, actually, is the love that we put forth, and that we love God for real.
Since being a member, it's kind of like you get out of it what you put into it. It's very practical. It's like if you put into it, you get out of it. You study the word, you listen to what pastor's saying, you kind of just apply it to your life and see that it works, and then you come back next Sunday and he gives you more instructions, and you keep doing it and it keeps working, and I love that.
Absolutely. And then also the experience is like we're just like a family here. You lose that in some churches, which was definitely lost for a while, but being back, it's like one is like a mini reunion, because everybody, you knew everybody growing up, and it's just a great experience every Sunday. 9 years is a testament of 9 different attempts of the enemy to tear the church down, but we came out victorious 9 years, and in 9 more we'll be here doing another documentary, saying how we made it another 9.
I haven't been here all 9 years, but I know that the church has truly come through so much, from the flight deck to Richmond to here to just so much. I know that we've grown in the spirit, that God, every move that we've had, We have lost some people, but he's also elevated us and united us even more. And I'm excited to see where God continues to take us. Yeah, we've had some struggles and some triumphs. There's just so much to say, but we ain't got that time. So it's been an honor to see Pastor grow and bloom into an amazing, he's always been amazing, but I mean he's amazing now. An amazing pastor, prophet, and priest, and a shepherd that cares for his people. He's not afraid to say things that are out the box. And I honor that, I respect that, and I pray that God continues to use you in that way, Pastor. You are a peculiar people. We are a peculiar people, so you ain't gotta be like everybody else. I just pray that God continues to cover you and strengthen you to walk in who he's ordained and called you to be. So I'm excited for year 10 through 100. So happy anniversary, we love you, and let's go.
In all of those transitions from Frank Ogawa to now, we have grown. We have grown tremendously, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, physically, some of us financially. Grateful for the God in me that has developed in all of this, because I couldn't have, in my wildest dreams, imagined to look at myself in just a small way how God sees me. Especially with some of the things that I had gone through prior to even being associated with Pastor and getting into LRM. I didn't think I would be alive. So to go from that to declaring victory and to declaring that I'm going to live and speak of his goodness it's still mind-blowing to me. But here we are, year 9, happy anniversary, and we are elevating because God has some other things in store for us. So this is really the beginning of the beginning of the beginning. So here we go.
But this is not the end of the journey. Life Nation is stepping into the next season, one filled with elevation, expansion, and greater purpose. This is just the beginning of what God is doing.
When we come back and either view this a year from now, we're gonna know that LRM elevated to a total different level. Where our current partnership is now, we're gonna be at a higher partnership. Where our finances are now, by the end of the year, they're gonna be elevated to a higher amount. Where our spiritual levels are now, by the end of the year, they're going to be elevated to a total different level. We're elevating in all areas in 2025.
And as we close this chapter and prepare for the next, there is one voice that has led this journey from the very beginning. A shepherd who said yes to the call, despite every challenge, every setback, and every victory.
If I were to give any word of encouragement that to LRM, this is the year of elevation, and this is the year we go all the way up, and that the lowest we ever been is where we've been. This is the brokest we'll ever be. This is the lowest we'll ever be. This is the sickest we'll ever be. This is the loneliest we'll ever be, because it's only up from here. And so I am excited for the next season. I am excited for the next journey. And I don't know about you, but I'm ready to go. And we about to go up.